Hey, I'm making my own way, but I stumble and I falter every day. But I love my baby now. Well, I love my baby, I'm still learning how. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Stay with me. We'll beat these
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pathways to Parenting Success. I'm your host, Dr. Jan Hittleman, the Director of Boulder Psychological Services. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to our talk on marijuana and adolescence. We have a wonderful panel for you tonight, and it's an important discussion, especially with the recent legalization of marijuana in Colorado. I want to thank our sponsors, the Boulder Valley School District, Channel 22, for making this possible, as well as the Boulder Library Foundation, Louisville Library Foundation, Parent Engagement Network, the Boulder Counseling Cooperative, the Hope Coalition, the Boulder County Healthy Youth Alliance, Centennial Peaks Hospital, the Daily Camera, and the Broomfield Public Library as well. Thank you to all our sponsors. We would really like you, the audience members, to be involved in this conversation as well. You can do so by going to www.boulderpsychologicalservices.com and click on the Submit Questions icon, and your question will come right here for our panelists. So please participate in the conversation tonight. We also appreciate our audience, our live audience that's here with us this evening, and there are index cards and pens. Please let us know your questions as well, and we'll be sure to ask the panelists. We have a great panel for you this evening, and I'm just going to start off by introducing our panelists. We have first Dr. Leland Johnston. Dr. Johnston is a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst for children, adolescents, and adults. He has been in private practice since 1983, first in Seattle for 17 years and now in Boulder since 2000. He teaches at the Denver Institute for Psychoanalysis and is clinical faculty at the Department of Psychiatry, University of Colorado Health Sciences in Denver. Welcome, Dr. Johnston. We also have with us this evening Linda Kane. Linda has over 25 years of experience working with struggling youth and young adults. As an educational and therapeutic consultant, she helps families identify and select appropriate resources such as therapeutic boarding schools, rehab programs, transitional living programs to ensure student success. She specializes in learning disabilities, substance abuse, emotional, behavioral, and mental health issues. We're also very fortunate to have a couple of high school students with us as well, our real experts tonight, and I'd like to introduce them as well. First, we have Eliza Smith, who is a junior at New Vista High School. She has been part of the Natural Highs program for 2 years. She's passionate about facilitating empowering dialogue with teens around making conscious choices. Welcome, Eliza. We also have with us Blake Mann. Blake is a senior from New Vista High School. He's been part of Natural Highs for 2 years. While he started as a result of a court order, he's continued because he really finds the program helpful. And he actually recently traveled to Israel to help start a Natural Highs program there. So I want to also welcome Blake to our panel. Last but certainly not least, we have Avani Dilger. Avani is a licensed professional counselor and certified addiction counselor, specializing in substance abuse prevention and treatment with adults, teens, and families. She's the founder of the Natural Highs program, which is a healthy alternative to drugs and alcohol program. And that program is being offered in several Boulder high schools as well as Naropa University. And we're going to be very fortunate tonight to learn a lot more about this fantastic resource that we're so lucky to have in our community. I'd like to start this evening by asking Dr. Johnston to bring us up to speed, as well as Linda Kane, on some of the recent research around this topic. And so let's start with Dr. Lee Johnston. Lee?
Yeah, cannabis is a very complex plant. 400 compounds, more than 60 cannabinoids. The only cannabinoid we've done much research on is THC, which is the psychoactive cannabinoid. It's a very different vehicle for getting high these days. Back in the 60s, in my day, it was like 1 to 5% THC on street dope. Now it's more like 10 to 15% THC in medical marijuana. Most of the research was done on like 2 to 4% THC cannabis. And unfortunately, it's been a very limited amount of research because it's been a controlled substance from 1979 until medicalization, which really was the back door to legalization. I want to talk about medical marijuana first, talk about some of the research very briefly. Medical claims for marijuana are anecdotal and go back to 2700 BC. There's much anecdotal evidence, but there's very little of the kind of research that we like to see in medicine, which would have double-blind data, prospective studies that are randomized, and the research would be with adequate numbers. We know now from the research we've done there are cannabinoid receptors all over the brain. To describe a little bit about the research, I want to hit 3 main points. First, it's a very complex cannabinoid receptor system. I'll give you 2 examples. One example is that smoked marijuana is associated with or causal to several cancers we know about. At the same time, we know now that there's probably a cannabinoid receptor that has some anti-cancer properties. Second example of this, we have 7 studies that document increased risk of psychotic symptoms. That means auditory hallucinations, paranoia, thought broadcasting. These 7 studies will document as much as 2% increased risk of psychotic symptoms. There's a study out of Australia that's, there were 2,000 people in the study. 3,008 people in the study. And if you smoked marijuana before the age of 15, you were more than 2 times more likely to have psychotic symptoms. Now, at the same time, we're beginning to find out that there's an antipsychotic property in marijuana that hits one of the cannabinoid receptors. Second thing I want to describe is the changes in research are very fast. Back in 1985, cannabinoid receptors were understood. 2 cannabinoids were given approval by the FDA for chemotherapy patients for nausea. Since that time, since 1985, there's been the development of a number of anti-nausea medications, particularly anti-nausea medications having to do with antagonism at the serotonin receptor. We know now that what you can do with cannabinoid receptors is nowhere near the anti-nausea that you can achieve with current technology. The third thing, the research is very recent. For example, in September alone, a cannabinoid receptor was discovered that probably has anti-seizure property. This is animal research, it's preclinical. There's a lot of research that's being done with cannabinol and cannabidiol. In fact, some of the research is documenting gains that are being made with muscle spasm with multiple sclerosis and pain control. There's a product that's now in Canada and also improved in parts of Europe. It's called Saltivex. It's Saltivex. The mechanism for delivering the cannabinoid through, and also includes some THC, is through a mouth spray. So you'll be hearing more and more about the research, but there's 2 take-home points. One is that the medical uses and ways to address therapies really need to explore research much more about this huge cannabinoid receptor system we have. And 2, smoked marijuana is a very crude delivery system. And there are lots of cannabinoids to experiment with and to discover about, research that's yet to be done. But now I want to talk about the dangers of smoked marijuana, or marijuana in general, particularly with the adolescent population. Back in August of 2012, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science reported a study on IQ, the loss of IQ points, 8 IQ points. Now, this study would seem to be remarkable that you could show through a group that were studied from birth. They were born in 1972. This is 1,037 New Zealanders that were studied all up until the age 38. There were interviews and testing done all through that period. But the key research that was striking about marijuana was the onset of smoking marijuana. The persistent use of marijuana in adolescence would have the IQ point degradation. So 100 IQ points is like a 50% percentile. You lose 8 points, you're in a 29 percentile. That's a huge deficit. But the real finding was that after these people became sober, they did not recover their IQ. Whereas there was not a similar decline in adults that began smoking after the age of 18. Now that tends to corroborate or run parallel to some other studies that were done. Pope in 2003 and Brooke in 2008 studying executive function. Executive function is a prefrontal cortex. It's responsible for sustaining attention. Working memory is involved, but you sustain attention while performing the sequencing of information, prioritization, organization, modulation of emotion, modulation of activity level, and really input and output of memory. Most any other mechanism of the brain has to go through executive function. The studies documented by Pope that after age 18, there would be a loss of executive function. This has been well documented by many researchers. It's why it's called DOPE. Loss of executive function, but you would recover executive function. Brooke, however, in 2008 documented that adolescents who started smoking between the ages of 14 and 22 went sober at 22, had their executive function losses between 14 and 22, but went sober, and 5 years later at age 27, they had not recovered all their executive function. So that's over a 5-year period of sobriety, they had not recovered executive function losses. Now, what mechanisms can explain this? We've had studies since mid-2000s. 2008 studies were done documenting by imagery hippocampal loss of volume, loss of size in the prefrontal cortex. But only as recently as June 2010, reported in the Progress with Neurobiology, did anyone begin to understand some of the complexities of the cannabinoid receptor system. That receptor system seems to be very responsible for downregulation, upregulation of a lot of signaling across the brain. Now, glutamate receptor systems and GABAergic receptor systems are very crucial during adolescent brain development. They need to be in balance. And a CB1 receptor of the cannabinoid receptor system can get hit by THC, and that will imbalance the glutamate and GABAergic receptor systems. It seems this is what's probably responsible during that very fragile time of adolescence, the time where at age 10 you have the most neurons you'll ever have in your lifetime. Between 10 and the rest of your life, you're pruning the brain constantly to try to establish the networks that are going to be most efficient in sort of performing the cognitive processing. 40% of that pruning happens in adolescence. So during those few years, the balance seems to be crucial in order to have the laying down of the tracks for executive function that improve the efficiency of the brain during all of that pruning. That's when we're most vulnerable. That's when we're trying to present tonight how important it is to get the word out about anything about adolescent abuse of marijuana that could cause that kind of problem. Meanwhile, we'll continue to explore medical uses of marijuana and the cannabinoid receptor system. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. And Linda, do you have some research that you wanted to add to the discussion?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about marijuana use in adolescents today. So the National Institute of Drug Abuse recently released a report with some really good news. It said that adolescent use of cigarettes and of alcohol has been slowly decreasing over the last number of years. The bad news is that marijuana use has been on the increase, and that today 1 in 15 high school students use marijuana nearly daily. By nearly daily, they mean at least 6 days out of the week. In Colorado, our statistic for marijuana use among youth is about 10% higher than the national average for marijuana use. What about in Boulder? Well, in our area, every 2 years, Boulder County participates in a survey that's put out by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and it's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This was actually developed by the CDC to help local communities get information and statistics and knowledge about local risk behaviors going on among their high school kids. So 2011 was our last survey that was done in our area. Interestingly enough, 80% of high school students said, my parents would not approve of me using marijuana. Over half the kids responded, I don't approve of kids my age using marijuana. Over half the kids also said, I think using marijuana while you're a teenager puts you at risk. But 40% of the kids said, I've used marijuana in my life, and 26% of the kids said, I have used marijuana within the last 30 days. If you go back 2 years to 2009, so those statistics are up about 2%. So today was 2011 was 26% of the kids had used it in the last 30 days. 2009 was about 24% of the kids. We live in an area where cigarette smoking is really frowned upon, and a lot of kids reflected that on the survey. Again, with my parents wouldn't approve of it, I don't approve of it, I think it puts kids my age at great risk. In fact, the statistics were like roughly around 90% for all those areas. But what our students may not be realizing is that the same smoke that's being inhaled into their lungs from cigarettes, that the same carcinogens and co-carcinogens that are found in tobacco smoke are also found in the marijuana smoke. In fact, France and New Zealand just completed studies that showed that if you smoked 1 joint a day, you were at a slightly higher risk for lung cancer than if you smoked a pack of cigarettes per day. What about marijuana use in our schools? Disciplinary actions are up 25% for anything drug-related. Drug-related suspensions and expulsions are up over 25% in our schools. Kind of in a nutshell, some of what Lee was referring to is, kids that are high, their perception, concentration, recall, coordination of facts, and ability to learn are all being affected. Something we have these great kids here, and I don't want to take too long, but 2 things I'd like to just leave you with or tell you and hope you will remember. If someone never smokes marijuana before age 18, they are 4 times more likely to not only graduate high school, but to actually graduate college as well. And that's in comparison to somebody who starts smoking before the age of 15. The thing that we keep talking about in marijuana is the THC. THC is a fat-soluble substance, or THC is fat-soluble, which means that it's stored in the fat cells. So it takes 3 days for a body to process out half the THC in 1 joint. It takes another 30 days for the body to process out the rest of it. So the bottom line is an adolescent who's saying, I smoke maybe 1 joint on the weekend, they're never free of THC. And in reality, they're actually building up and accumulating the amount of THC that is stored in their brain. So whether it's they're inhaling it, they're smoking it, or they're baking it into brownies, marijuana truly has highly toxic qualities to it, and it's putting our teens at risk.
Thanks, Linda. And you know, one of the things that we know historically, for example, when I was in high school, and it sounds ridiculous now to say, but when I was in high school, there was no awareness that cocaine was dangerous, believe it or not. Now, of course, we know better. And I think what we'll see as research continues, a little bit more insight into marijuana, some of the addictive qualities, and maybe Ivani could talk about that a little later as well. But what I'm really excited about this evening is to have some of the high school students that participate in the Natural Highs program. We are so fortunate to have that program in our community. And for those of you watching, this is such a great resource for your adolescence. And unlike any other program that I've ever heard of around treating adolescents for any issue, because of the unique design of the Natural Highs program, adolescents love attending. I know that's hard to believe, but as you'll find out shortly, it's true. In fact, we have a couple of the students here tonight that participate in the Natural Highs program, and I'm hoping that Eliza can start us off with some thoughts about the program and her experience.
Well, hi, I'm Eliza. I just want to make Blake feel free to add in. Natural Highs is a sober community that is there to support kids in everyday life. We do a lot of focusing on the sobriety aspect, but that's not all we are. Kids walk away from Natural Highs talking about loving themselves more. They talk about having a safe place to be, a fulfilling place to be. And Natural Highs for me is a lot about getting sober and feeling good and really learning how to get that fulfillment and that success and that feeling of, yes, I did it, or like, I have stuff to do. Instead of, sitting at home and trying to figure out what you have to do without friends. Because I know one of the biggest issues in our communities with teens around smoking marijuana is that everyone does it. And so there's a lot of, smoking is the given and sobriety is the choice. Instead of sobriety is the given and smoking is the choice, which can create a lot of peer pressure. And so for me and a lot of kids, Natural Highs has just been a supportive, safe haven to be, where we do things that we're proud of and we learn how to really feel good with our own brain chemistry.
Blake, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, of course. So I'll tell a little bit about my personal story. So I have a pretty powerful story. And I started off with, the first drug I did was ecstasy, and then the next one was cocaine. And then eventually I moved my way to marijuana and went through, as many others as possible. But I think something really important to know is the reason why I did that is because I had been told so much about marijuana, and my parents had done such a good job of educating me about that I was scared of it. And so I think it's really important for programs like Natural Highs to be active because you learn about everything. Because in schools, I only learned about marijuana. And, they told us a little bit about the others, but it was more just like, these are bad, don't do them. And so in Natural Highs, you actually learn the brain chemistry behind it. And it's really powerful. And so, yeah. And then I had more to want to say.
I think one of the most important things about Natural Highs is that we really sort of feed the part of the brain that wants the logic and the information and, the really left-sided brain. But then also we do a lot of work around movement and meditation and getting high without substance and, being conscious about what's going on in your body that really feeds that creative right brain too. And also one of the biggest points that drew me to Natural Highs was the idea that sobriety and substance use and whatever you put in your body is your personal choice. And it was the fact that we as teens were empowered to make such a big choice for ourselves in this community, which felt huge. Because no one had ever asked me, what do you really want to do? Like, what is really important to you? Like, where do you want to go, and how can I help you? And so that was really the seller for me, and that's what has kept me in the program and peer mentoring and supporting other kids.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And unlike a lot of the kids, I was actually court ordered to go. And so I originally was very closed-minded, but just being there in that community was incredible. And since then, I've fallen in love with the program, and my life has just gone nowhere but up.
Mm-hmm.
You both mentioned peer mentoring. I wonder if you could help our audience understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So peer mentoring is a position that teens in the action group, which is sort of like the leadership group, take. And we commit to being sober and being neutral, compassionate support systems. And so teens will come to us, or we'll offer out resources, friendship, things like that.
And does it require a certain amount of time in the program? Like, how do you move up to that level?
We just participating in all of the things that Natural Highs is, like helping with events and coming to the Tuesday classes and helping clean up and set up and do all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then through that, if you're passionate enough about it, we're allowed to be peer mentors, which is really incredible. And I've had some amazing experiences with it. I've had a lot of kids come to me and tell me that I am a huge role model for them, and they're the reason why, or I'm an inspiration for why they were sober.
And do you find that peer mentoring helps you with your own sobriety?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's honestly one of the biggest things that keeps me going, is doing things like this, even just talking about my story and educating people and teens especially on the dangers of this stuff.
Yeah, I definitely find that peer mentoring has been a huge contribution to my sobriety, because not only am I enjoying it, but I am doing something active with it. I am really making the best of it.
I'm also wondering, and I many years ago had the experience of Natural Highs when we were doing it together at Compass House. Mm-hmm. And so I have a little bit of a sense of it, but I'd love for you guys just to give our audience, because we're talking about the program, but I don't think anyone really has a sense as to what happens there. And I know a lot happens, so I'm not sure you could put it into words so easily, but how could you explain it to someone that hasn't been there?
Well, our biggest class is our Tuesday class. I mean, we have a bunch of different branches off of that.
Where does that take place?
That is actually at the Hope Church off of Baseline.
Okay.
And we're not associated with the church, but it's just a space for us right now because we're currently without a home, I guess, because of lack of funding.
Okay.
And so, that's our biggest class. And what we'll do is it's a drop-in class for any high school age students. And, do you want to talk more about it?
So essentially what we do is we have a ceremony called sharing the yerba mate, which is a huge part to our program. Yerba mate is a tea from Argentina, and it is containing the full spectrum of amino acids, and it is traditionally drunk from a gourd and a bombilla, which is a filtering straw. And so not only is this tea very nourishing to our brain chemistry, but also the ceremony much replicates passing a bong or a joint, and so it becomes like becomes a sacred thing and a sign of friendship for a lot of kids. And so we also sit in a circle, which is like a big sign of equality, and that we all sort of sit in the same place, even though Blake and I peer mentor, we sit in the same place as these kids, and we're still learning every day. And so a lot of what we do is brain chemistry and neuroscience, and learning about this really physical aspect about our bodies. How do we work? What is it to be you on a scientific level? And through these, we explore sort of how to manipulate that brain chemistry to feel how you want to feel. So how do you move in a way that will release dopamine, which is accomplishment? How do you create friendships in a way which is serotonin and connection? And then also we do a lot of guided meditation or kind of inner reflective work. Blake, you want to say anything?
Yeah, totally. I think one of the biggest things that brought me into Natural Highs and really made me fall in love with it was that sense of community, because I didn't need to go smoke weed or do drugs with friends to have a group of people that I could share things with. And I thought that was really powerful. And then another part of the brain chemistry, the one that I love the most, is learning about pathways in your brain, because it's really incredible learning about like things as little as like how you drive to school every day and how driving a different way can release different neurotransmitters. And it's just, I love it. And then as for the guided meditations and stuff, what we'll do is we'll do something called pushing and shaking, and we'll get a partner for the pushing, and they're two separate activities. And we will push against the partner, and we do this for like 5 minutes or so, and it's one of the fastest ways to exhaust your energy so that you can really be ready for that guided meditation. And this is one of the greatest ways to get a natural high for me, is pushing, and then we will, after that, lead into shaking. And from there, this is a little out there, but we will play this music and just kind of shake to it. And it's very similar to what animals do when they go through a trauma. And that's why it's so powerful, because you're just shaking off whatever bad emotions from that day, and you've pushed out everything so that when we're laying down for the journey, you're just in a really beautiful space. And then we also do, during the journey, we have a lot of Reiki practitioners, and that's an energy work. Yeah, it's an energy work. And we have a lot of practitioners that will give Reiki to the other students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then also we explore, along with the pushing and shaking, we explore our brain chemistry from a really sort of primal viewpoint, looking at, when you are really stressed out, it doesn't have to be about fixing everything in your life. It can just be about moving that energy that would have been running from the tiger out of your body so that you can relax. Because, a lot of kids are smoking weed because they are stressed out, can't sleep, can't eat. And, like problems like not being able to sleep and not being able to eat are from being stressed out, which are because we're not moving enough. A lot of times in our society, we don't move with a purpose. And so it's all about finding those neural pathways that have been, evolved in us for thousands of years and using them to our benefit, because those are the kind of things that our society overlooks a lot and tries to medicate.
One of my favorite quotes that I ever heard was, I'm tired today because I didn't move enough. And since I heard that, I just love it. And yeah, I had more to say, but blanking.
Well, you guys are amazing. The program's impressive, but you're even more impressive than the program. So I don't know how you did that, but maybe we could hear, and Ivani Dilger is here. She's actually the creator of the Natural Highs program, and she's off camera, but she's like the proud mother listening to these two participants. So I'd love to hear from Ivani something you might want to add about the Natural Highs program and the work you're doing.
Yeah, so, there's an interesting perception in our community around marijuana and young people, so the perception that everybody's doing it. And what we find very interesting, we've been doing now Natural Highs for the last 7 years in different high schools in Boulder. And at the end, when we do our evaluation, we ask kids what the 6 to 8 week course, what difference it made to them. And it's so interesting because over 85% of participants regularly say that after 6 to 8 weeks of the program, they either decide to reduce their substance use or they decide to quit, which is just a phenomenal number when you think about that. And what we do, just like Eliza and Blake say, we don't tell people what to do. We don't tell young people what to do. We just say, keep an open mind and listen to the information of what marijuana and other drugs actually do in your brain. And it's interesting to me that just by the fact that people have better information, they, in the majority, make that decision to actually quit or reduce their use, which, tells you that obviously not enough people have that information. I mean, there's a lot of myth out there, especially in regards to marijuana. One of the myths that I'm seeing day to day in my work as a substance abuse counselor is that most people that I talk to who smoke marijuana say that they don't think it's addictive. They say, well, I can quit anytime. And they do sometimes for 2-3 days, right? And the interesting thing is that when people are forced to quit, let's say they get in trouble with the law or for any other reason they have to quit, they can't do it. So there's this discrepancy between people perceiving marijuana as harmless and non-addictive, but then when push comes to shove, people can't quit. And so this is one of the pieces that we teach to people to understand that dynamic. And Linda, you talked a little bit about the dynamic. The reason that marijuana doesn't feel addictive, but is so addictive, is that it's about the only slow release drug to the extent that marijuana is. You know, there's no other drug, I think, that stays in the system.
Oh, it's the longest by far.
Yeah, is the longest, right? So what that means is it's a similar situation as if you would snort cocaine today, and for 28 days you would have little bursts of cocaine going off in your system. That's how marijuana works, because you get little bursts of THC going off in your system for 28 days, which means, just like Linda said, that if you smoke marijuana today, you are under the influence for a very long time. And that creates very interesting perceptions in people. You know, for example, that they're not addictive, that they could quit anytime, things like that. And so that's just one of the pieces that we address, you know, teaching people. So once people hear that, they're not so interested in using marijuana anymore.
I have to tell you, that's exactly why I quit. Because even in being in diversion, which is like probation, but after you're done with it, you're allowed to have it expunged from your record. I was still trying to find sneaky ways to do drugs and get around P tests and all these things. And then through being at Natural Highs and learning that all that information about marijuana, I was like, wow, I do not want to do that.
Yeah, also one thing that we teach in the program is that the habits that you make between when you're 10 and 25, because of the way your brain is developing, you solidify them for the rest of your life. I had this thought that I didn't want to be smoking marijuana for the rest of my life. Like, that just didn't seem in alignment with what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do.
And one of the biggest questions I get is, like, how are you sober? Like, why are you sober? And honestly, that's kind of touching on the pathways, is like when people ask me if I want a drag of a cigarette or to go drink, I just think, pathways, do I really want to be doing that? And just no.
Yeah, it's impressive. And the program is free. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's grant funded through the Youth Opportunities Board, partially through the City of Boulder, and then it's also supported by the YMCA. So we are supported through different agencies in Boulder.
And my understanding is that it's a drop-in program. In other words, you could go if you want to go, you don't have to go. It's really totally, it seems like a very kind of youth-empowered program, where youth are really making the decisions.
Yeah. I mean, she's our mentor and she teaches the classes, but, you know, it's really, the drive is from the youth.
Well, at this point, really, there's a group of 25 high school students who are in the leadership program, in the action group, and they really create the program. They decide what is being taught in the classes. They decide what events we put on. They peer mentor the classes. They do community presentations with me. So it's like, yes, the program is run by teens.
And I know, Ivana, you have a website. The website is www.naturalhighs.us. So feel free to take a look at that, www.naturalhighs.us. And would that be a place where people could find out about future events and programs?
Yeah, we don't really have time to update our website. We're so busy. But the best way to stay updated is probably our Facebook page, which you find under Natural Highs Boulder. It's a page that you can like, and if you like it, then you get the regular updates. That's kind of where we put our updated information.
So Natural Highs Boulder on Facebook.
Correct.
Good to know. And then,
Can we talk about the event that we have coming up before we
yes,
forget?
that was exactly what I wanted to do.
Good.
I know there's an event coming up March 2nd, but maybe before we talk about that specifically, you can just fill us in general about the events that you guys hold, because what you're describing is the Natural Highs class, for lack of a better word, but I understand there's also free sober events that Natural Highs sponsors too. Maybe we could hear more about that.
One of the most important parts about Natural Highs is finding passions and activities to do that sort of empower your sobriety or fuel it. And the events is a big one that we put on, because besides our classes, we have these sober events that are for teens to relax, have fun. There's kind of a
It
big
also gives you something to do on like a Friday or Saturday night instead of going out and drinking and partying.
A healthy alternative.
Yeah.
there's a big stigma that once you're sober, you can't party, you can't have fun. I know that even myself, I get this stigma put on me that I am somehow prude or not fun or stuck up because I choose not to smoke or drink or anything like that. But the Natural Highs events create space where kids can come together and dance and have drum circles and do energy work and just have fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been more high in those classes than on any drug I've ever been in.
You mentioned, I'll call it stigma for lack of a better word, Eliza, that, some of your friends will say, oh, you're a prude, you're not getting high, et cetera. Do you think that's a challenge for a lot of kids out there that are trying to, lead a more sober lifestyle?
I think it's a challenge for every kid out there that's doing that because, even in the community that we're in, we're getting it. So if you're not in that kind of community, I can't even imagine how much people are doing that and pressuring you.
I definitely think that is the root of a lot of peer pressure around drugs and alcohol.
Definitely.
Like, why not? Like, why don't you take risks? Like, why don't you want to have fun? And I think that is where a lot of the first-time experimentation from a lot of youth comes from.
Yeah, and just being uneducated, because if you're uneducated about it and you're getting that kind of pressure, it's very easy to fall in.
Mm-hmm.
I want to remind our audience that you can participate in the conversation by going to our website, www.boulderpsychologicalservices.com. Click on the Submit Questions icon, and we'll get your questions here. We do have some questions, but I'm not sure we can answer them, but let's find out.
Okay.
For example, here's a question that we got online. My slow computer will, here we go. I'm just going to read it to you the way it's written, and then we'll see if we can answer it. Do you recognize the information which many researchers have found that there is an increased risk of psychosis among teenage and young adult marijuana users? If so, why didn't any of you, and this is, I think, directed more to the professionals on the panel, why didn't any of you make this information better known to the public before the November election? They're referring to the legalization of marijuana. If you believe there are health risks, why were you and the entire Boulder community of psychologists and psychiatrists, so we're both in this together, Lee. I didn't add psychiatrists, it's really in the question, I just wanted to know that. Why are you psychologists and psychiatrists so quiet on this issue before the election when it counted? I'll give it to you, Lee.
And I want to also add to that. Jen, I want to also add to it after Lee.
Sounds good.
The criticism's well placed, so I won't be defensive about it, but I will make a few comments to clarify. Are you old enough, whoever asked the question, when cigarettes were first released into the public, the information about cancer? Because there's a huge incremental shift in information and the willingness of the population at large to accept the information, to change a substance that has so much infiltration to all across public sort of use and ritual. I think of those times. I'm old enough to remember them. I remember, the huge congressional effort there was to get the cigarette packages labeled that they were a risk to cancer. And that's a very, very simplistic sort of association. You smoke, you're going to have cancer. Marijuana is so much more complex in terms of the ways that it operates. I tried to illustrate that earlier, that there are a number of things that are involved with marijuana. And the fact that it could even come to legalization through the back door of medicalization is what it was incredible to me. I mean, I was giving talks, and there are other people that give talks and try to get the information out. But, part of this is who's listening. And, but no, the information needs to be out. It needs to be spread by everyone. This is a huge issue.
And
I want to add
go
to
ahead,
that, too.
Ivani.
So I think the whole connection between marijuana and psychosis is really important. We talk about it in our program all the time, and we describe psychotic symptoms to high school students, and we ask, how many students in a class have experienced those symptoms, and we get that a lot of students who smoke marijuana are experiencing psychotic symptoms. And there's just something going on that is absolutely not known and talked about, which is that a lot of people experience those gray zone symptoms, where it's maybe not serious enough to be hospitalized, but where people actually see and hear things that they shouldn't be seeing and hearing. And so we are very concerned about that, and we have lots of conversations in high schools about that. So I just want to say we're trying to get exactly that piece of information out because we're extremely concerned about it. Because if you have those symptoms at that critical time of your brain development, it's not a good setup. So we see daily that it's actually happening, that it's a huge risk for young people.
But I would be quick to add that you cannot make the association that marijuana causes schizophrenia, or that it has particularly the impact of creating psychotic symptoms that are going to be long-standing. The research needs to happen in a way that will make it much more clear, because it's in everybody's common experience. You don't go psychotic when you're smoking marijuana. I mean, that just happens so infrequently that there's psychotic symptoms, but it's very real when it happens, and not just in the transient way. I'm talking about in the way where somebody's hospitalized and you're trying to figure out whether they're first onset manic depressive psychosis or schizophrenia, or is it just the drugs that are on board and it's going to clear within a week.
I also think that there is a lot of secrecy around it. I know that a lot of people that are experiencing that sort of gray zone that Avani was talking about either don't understand that they're experiencing that gray zone, or they're embarrassed by it. No one wants to go to, no one that I know wants to go to the school counselor and be like, hey, I think my name's being called, when it's not all the time. Like, I think that that is just something that people put under the radar so often that it's not really something that people think to put out there unless they're from Natural Highs or well-researched on it.
Yeah. Jan, the other thing I would say is that there is research out there that shows that especially adolescents who are using marijuana are at higher risk for depression, anxiety, and some psychotic symptoms, definitely. The other piece, not to be defensive either, is that actually there were a lot of talks that we were doing. I know at Boulder Psychological Services, we put on some talks. We did a TV show regarding marijuana. I think there has been effort by many people to really try and get more information out to the public about marijuana. But I totally agree that there wasn't enough information out there, or we weren't putting it out in the way that it was really being received by people, being heard.
Also, I'd like to add is that it's really easy to be uneducated about your vice or a widely accepted vice.
You guys did a much better job than I thought we could do. Way to go, panel. I also want to mention to our audience that we have some shows coming up through our Pathways of Success program, and one of them, we actually kind of linked it together with this program. One of them is going to be happening this week, on Thursday, the 28th of February, at the Louisville Library from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and the topic is Adolescent Substance Abuse, What Parents Need to Know. And this is going to be facilitated by two licensed addiction counselors that are also licensed professional counselors, Kat Austin and Jen Sutton. And it's a real great opportunity to learn about the prevalence of adolescent substance abuse. And they're going to talk about all kinds of substance abuse, not just marijuana, but it'll be more of a workshop format. And I would really encourage parents to make it a point to attend that upcoming presentation on Thursday the 28th, 6:30 at the Louisville Library. More information about all of our events is on our website, boulderpsychologicalservices.com. We had a couple of other questions from the audience here, and these two I think are going to be challenging for us to answer, but maybe we can discuss them. I'm going to read them both. They both are really questions more for the school district, and because we don't have a school district person here, I'm not sure that we can really address them. One of them is, why can't BVSD bring in dogs to sniff for drugs in lockers, backpacks, etc.? And then the other one, why can't BVSD at high school level tell students the bad effects of marijuana on their brains? Now, you guys have gone through some health curriculum in the district, and what's your experience been there? Is it discussed, or what's your experience
Yeah, it's
been?
definitely discussed. I think that they They definitely try to give the information out, but I don't think that they themselves are educated well enough in the just subject that they are able to or really want to go that in depth with the information. And that's why I think it's really important to bring things like natural highs into schools. And actually, we are going to be taking, like, when we're teaching the classes, we're going to be teaching classes in our schools, people in the action group. We're going to take time out of our advisories to teach brain chemistry and stuff like that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, advisory is like a homeroom.
Yeah.
Also, just personally being in school at this age, I know that there's always talk about lack of funding in schools, but, you know, we can barely keep our class sizes down. Like, there's really not room in budgets for dogs. And also just around health classes, that the information is evolving so fast and there's really not enough out there in general that it's hard for, you know, a school to keep up with that. As well as a lot of schools that I've been to talk a lot about the harm, but never about the aftermath of being sober. What do you do to feel good? How do you make friends? The part that nourishes a person.
That's a really excellent point, because I think that one of my biggest struggles after being sober in the beginning was trying to find something else to do, because I felt like there was nothing fun to do anymore. I couldn't even remember. I mean, my drug phase wasn't long, but I couldn't even remember what I used to do to have fun. And so having an alternative is really something that should be taught.
Right. As a freshman in high school, I remember thinking, you know, I'll trade a few years of, brain dead for friends.
And I think that's an important issue. You know, you touched on it before in terms of the sense of community that Natural Highs brings. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that in terms of, your perception. My sense is that you're really right on the mark, that a draw for a lot of kids, not everybody, around substance abuse is really, I've certainly worked with many kids who were socially anxious, a little socially withdrawn, never really had a group of friends, and then they discovered, well, if I smoke pot, boom, I have an instant group of friends that are there. And I just wonder if that rings true in terms of your experience as well.
Definitely. I think that, so I've always been a person who has a big community of people around me. And I was an athlete my whole life and still am. And so I've always had whatever sport I was playing, I had the community. And I think the thing different about marijuana and natural highs is it's a different kind of community, because with that it's, you play sports together, so you have that and you can fall back on them. But with this, it's like you're creating this connection by choice that's just completely different. And I think that's why natural highs is so powerful, because it's very similar to the connection you make with smoking with someone.
I think one of the biggest reasons that people, or especially teens, feel lonely is because there's a lack of interest in their personal human experience. And that's why I peer mentor, is because I'm not only interested in what's making you sad today or what's hard about being sober, but I want to know about the best day of your life too. I want to know about your average day. Like, I really want to know about your life. And I feel like that really rings important, is that I can go into natural highs and feel important and feel like I'm being heard and feel like I have people that care about what I'm doing. Because for kids or people that feel like their experience is not heard or no one wants to know what's going on for them, getting high is a really easy way to get on the same level as people.
I want to add something to that as well. I worked with so many people who were addicted to marijuana, young people, who didn't really like the chemical effect of THC. Where, when you look at that, you think, that's crazy. How can somebody be addicted to a substance that they don't really like the effect of so much? And in my experience, a big part of it is the social ritual aspect, where kids feel like, but this is a way to connect. It's really easy to walk up to somebody and say, do you want to get high with me? That's a very easy way of connecting instantly. And so what we see in the program, and that's how the program has evolved, is to ask the question, so how can we do that without using a substance that's not very good for us? And so we have discovered these other ways of connecting, or these other ways of rituals. So for example, like Eliza described, the yerba mate, which is a tea ritual that uses a very, very healthy herb, but has a similar gesture of connecting in a circle. And also we do philosophy circles, for example, so where we talk about really deep existential questions. And we find that that's really oftentimes what's behind drug use, are those really good positive intentions of connecting with people, of having an experience of being together in a very meaningful way. And so, yeah, we don't think, it's like people don't get into this randomly. The question is really, what does the drug substitute for? Because we know when you study marijuana in the brain, it's really just a substitute for a neurotransmitter that we naturally all have. And so the question really becomes, how can we do the original instead of the substitute?
And I think part of the success, well, I know most of the success of natural highs is the magic that is Avani, which we have to replicate. I don't know how we're going to do that. But I know that a big part of the success is this idea of substituting healthy ritual for unhealthy ritual. And I think that's lacking in a lot of substance abuse treatment programs where it's just a matter of sobriety, but without sort of the experience around what drove people to use. And that's one of the really smart components, I think, of the Natural Highs program, and that sense of community, an alternative community, a healthy community.
Definitely.
And I want to add another thing that was kind of a surprise for us. We had kids who discovered Reiki energy work. So, you might be surprised, what does that have to do with natural highs? Well, we had kids who discovered that there's a way that you can learn how to connect with somebody that is so profound and so spiritual that when kids have that experience, they come back and they say, this is what I was looking for when I was doing drugs, is that kind of experience that I can connect with something that is larger than myself. And we now have over 50 kids who are certified Reiki practitioners. So it's like people are desperate, young people are desperate to find other ways of connecting and having meaningful experiences. And when they see them, they take them. So I think that says a lot about the intelligence of young people, that it's really, once people have other options, they're happy to take them.
Right, and I think one of the most important aspects of natural highs, again, is not, we don't focus on the question, are you sober today? But we focus on the question, what is it like to be you today? And how can we make that even better than you could have ever possibly imagined?
And one of my favorite things about Natural Highs is how many branches off of Natural Highs I've gotten out of it. Like, I've gotten interested in herbalism, and I am very into Reiki as well. And I mean, it's just opened up my world in so many different ways than I could have never imagined.
And don't you think, Jan, that developmentally, adolescents are at a stage in high school in their life where, they're becoming autonomous. They're breaking away from their parents. So that deep connection with their parents, there is this... they're learning how to not just depend on their parents, but, spiritually and physically and emotionally, mentally, we're built to have those connections. So they go out and look for those connections. And in high school, they have more freedom from their parents, too. I mean, and so I think it's kind of like the perfect storm kind of time where, they can smoke marijuana and feel like they're really connecting, and it's meeting that developmental need in them.
I think that's a really excellent point, especially because I'm a senior. I am going to be graduating soon, and, I used to be scared of it, and, because I was going to lose so much connection with my family. And having something like this has taught me so many ways that I don't necessarily need them to still feel comfortable.
You can be connected, you can learn healthy relationships
Exactly.
with other people. That's really what, you're
Yeah.
learning to do, is that it's not only your parents, but
And
other,
with yourself.
other people.
That's one
And
of the most
yourself.
important things for me,
Absolutely.
is because, before Natural Highs, I don't know if I could say that I loved myself.
Yeah.
And, after the end of it, I love myself more than anything, and I love my life.
Because you're going to take you wherever you go.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention there's an upcoming event that the Natural Highs program is offering in the community, and I'm assuming youth can go if they haven't been involved in Natural
Yeah,
Highs before. It's
definitely.
open.
Definitely.
And it's called Flying High. It's on Saturday, March 2nd. It's a free program. There's going to be, and just listen to this. I mean, the adults are all jealous, Abani, is really what's happening here. There's an aerial dance workshop from 6 to 7:30. They're holding this at the Frequent Flyers Dance Studio, which is at 3022 Sterling Circle. And you could find out this information, I'm sure, on the Facebook page, Natural Highs Boulder. They're going to have Reiki. They're going to have the Yerba Mate bar. There's a DJ there, and I'm sure a lot more. There is a consent form that needs to be filled out, and you can get that at the website, naturalhighs.us. So I'd really encourage parents and, more importantly, youth to check it out and see what it's about.
Yeah, the consent form is only necessary for the aerial workshop that's going to happen in the beginning. But after that, we're going to have an open dance floor, which is free for anyone, and you can participate in one or both.
We are almost out of time. I do want to mention one other thing, getting back to the BVSD questions, and this isn't something that's really public knowledge, but to their credit, the Boulder Valley School District over the last school year has been meeting regularly. A lot of the administrators from all of the secondary schools have been meeting around creating safer schools for our students, and substance abuse issues has been a very, very important topic that's been discussed. I know because the district has invited myself, Avani, to those meetings as well, so there's a lot of community members that are partnering with the school district, and so behind the scenes, I think it's really impressive what the district's trying to do around all of this, and so I appreciate their efforts in that regard. I also want to let you know that we have some upcoming events. We present free workshops not only at the Louisville Library but also at the Meadows Branch Library in Boulder. Our next event there is actually an event for seniors on March 4th, Aging with Wisdom and Humor, and that's going to be facilitated by Karen Wilding. And then on March 11th, at the Broomfield Library, the Mamie Dowd Eisenhower Library in Broomfield, we're going to have a free presentation called Preparing for Adolescence, From Tween to Teen, facilitated by Dan Fox and Harmony Barrett Isaacs. So feel free to participate in these wonderful free events. They're all on our website. We would love to see you there. And I can also tell you that the next televised program that we have will be on March 18th, and it's around another very important topic, adolescent depression. Believe it or not, Colorado leads the nation in teen depression. And so we're going to be looking at that issue on March 18th. You could actually send questions now for that if you'd like, but I look forward to having you all watch that as well. I want to thank our wonderful panel. Thanks so much for being here tonight, doing such a fantastic job. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night.
And now the planet's done its bowing down, and soon the growth returns to follow ground. But I know what's churning underneath the snow, and I love my baby, and we've miles to go. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Be with me. We'll beat this, can't you see? So wait a while, winter time.